a quiet suburban neighborhood, where houses line the streets and families live side by side, seemed like the last place a scandal would unfold. Among the many families was one that seemed perfectly blended, a mother with a teenage daughter and a father with a teenage son. Both parents had found comfort in each other after failed marriages, believing they were creating a fresh start for their children. From the outside, they looked like the picture of a happy, modern family. The son was charismatic, athletic, and popular at school. He had an easy confidence that made people gravitate toward him. The daughter, in contrast, was more introverted, preferring to stay in her room and listen to music or sketch quietly. She wasn't shy, but she liked to keep to herself. The two teens were around the same age, and though they weren't related by blood, they were now expected to behave like siblings. At first, everything felt awkward. The boy was used to having his dad to himself, and the girl felt the same about her mom. Sharing their parents wasn't easy. Dinner conversations were stiff. No one knew what to say, and the silence felt louder than words. When their parents weren't around, the two barely acknowledged each other, passing in the hallways without so much as a nod. Over time, the tension began to ease. It started with small things, a joke about the awkward family dinners, a shared groan over chores. One day, when they were both stuck home on a rainy weekend, they found themselves watching the same show. Neither wanted to admit they liked it, but they ended up watching the whole season together. It became their thing. The walls between them started to crumble. They weren't just polite to each other anymore. They were laughing, teasing, and confiding in one another. He started telling her about his struggles with the basketball team, the pressure to be the best. She shared her insecurities, how she felt invisible at school. They weren't siblings. They were becoming friends. But something unspoken began to grow between them. He noticed the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. She couldn't stop thinking about his smile when he made her laugh. Neither of them dared to say it out loud, but they both felt it. Late at night, when the house was quiet, they would text each other from their rooms just a few feet apart. The conversations became more personal. He told her things he wouldn't tell his friends. She felt safe with him in a way she didn't understand. The line between friendship and something more blurred slowly, almost without them realizing it. One night, after family dinner, their parents went out for a late-night walk. It was just the two of them in the house. They ended up on the couch, watching their favorite show again. He absent-mindedly put his arm around her, and she leaned into him without thinking. For a moment, it felt natural, like they weren't step-siblings, but two people who fit together perfectly. When they realized how close they were, they froze. Their eyes met, and the room felt too quiet, too warm. He leaned in first, unsure but unable to stop himself. She didn't pull away. After that night, everything changed. They didn't talk about it, but it kept happening. The stolen kisses, the lingering touches. It was like they were addicted to each other. They knew it was wrong. They weren't blood-related, but they were still family now. If their parents found out, it would destroy everything. But they couldn't stop. They found excuses to be alone together. They lied to their friends about where they were. Every stolen moment felt like a secret only they could understand. They told themselves no one would ever find out. What they didn't realize was that secrets this big never stay buried for long. The thrill of sneaking around only made everything more intense. Every glance, every brush of their hands when no one was looking felt like an electric current passing between them. They weren't step-siblings in those moments. They were just two people wrapped up in something too powerful to stop. When their parents were around, they played the part of the perfect family. He'd tease her like a brother would, and she'd roll her eyes, pretending to be annoyed. But when they were alone, it was different. He would sneak into her room late at night, and they'd stay up for hours, whispering and laughing under the covers. Sometimes they wouldn't say anything at all, just lie there holding each other, listening to the sound of their hearts racing. It wasn't long before things started to change. The excitement that once felt exhilarating became something darker. He hated when she talked to other guys at school, even though she insisted they were just friends. He wasn't her boyfriend. He couldn't be. But it felt like she belonged to him. The idea of anyone else getting close to her made him feel sick. She noticed a shift in him, but didn't know how to stop it. He started texting her constantly when they weren't together, wanted to know where she was, who she was with, what she was doing. At first, it felt sweet, like he couldn't stand to be away from her. But soon, it started to feel suffocating. If she didn't respond fast enough, he would accuse her of ignoring him. If she laughed a little too long at another guy's joke, his face would darken, and he wouldn't talk to her for hours. She tried to brush it off. He was just scared of losing her, she told herself. They were both scared. What they had wasn't supposed to happen. They didn't belong together, but they couldn't stay apart. The jealousy didn't stop with her. He started picking fights with other guys at school, boys who looked at her, talked to her, even stood too close. He wasn't a violent person, but something inside him snapped when it came to her. He felt like they were the only two people in the world who understood each other, and anyone else was a threat. One night, after a party, everything exploded. She had gone with her friends, and he wasn't invited. He said he didn't care, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. He imagined her talking to other guys, laughing with them the way she laughed with him. The thought burned in his chest. She came home late, smelling like cheap beer and bonfire smoke. He was waiting for her. He asked her where she had been, who she was with. His voice was low and cold, nothing like the boys she used to stay up all night talking to. She tried to calm him down, but he wasn't listening. He accused her of lying, of sneaking around behind his back. She reminded him that they weren't a real couple. They couldn't be. That only made it worse. He grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to hurt her, but hard enough to make her heart pound. His eyes weren't the same anymore. There was something else behind them, something desperate and broken. She pulled away, her voice shaking as she told him he was scaring her. He let her go, but the look on his face stayed with her long after she shut her bedroom door. Neither of them slept that night. She stared at the ceiling, wondering how they got here, how something that once felt so right could turn into this. He sat in his room, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't control. He loved her. He hated her. He couldn't live without her, but he couldn't stand the idea of losing her to someone else. And somewhere deep down, he knew they were past the point of no return. The tension between them only grew stronger after that night. They stopped pretending everything was normal when they were alone. He was quieter, watching her more than talking to her. She felt it, the way his eyes lingered too long, the way he flinched when she mentioned other people. It wasn't the same boy she fell for anymore. There was something darker in him now, something she didn't recognize. She told herself it was just a rough patch. They were under too much pressure. Their relationship wasn't supposed to exist, and the weight of that secret was enough to crush anyone. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. At school, he became more distant from his friends. He stopped hanging out after basketball practice. He didn't laugh the way he used to. People noticed, but no one asked him why. They just assumed he was going through a phase. Only she knew the truth, that his mood swings weren't random. They were about her. Every time she tried to pull back, he found a way to reel her back in. If she ignored his texts, he would show up at her locker. If she avoided him at home, he'd corner her in the hallway. He didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. He just looked hurt, like she was the only thing keeping him alive, and she was slowly letting him die. One night, after their parents went to bed, he knocked on her bedroom door. She hesitated before opening it. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, and she felt her heart sink. "I can't lose you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. She tried to tell him he wasn't losing her, but the words felt hollow. They both knew things weren't the same anymore. He wasn't the same. He stepped closer. She could smell the cologne he always wore, the one she used to love. He reached for her hand, and for a second, she almost let him. But something in her chest screamed at her to pull away. "We can't keep doing this," she said, her voice shaking. His face twisted into something she'd never seen before, something cold and angry. His hand dropped to his side, and he stared at her like she was a stranger. "You're lying," he said. "You don't want to stop." She tried to reason with him, but it was like he wasn't listening anymore. He told her no one would ever love her the way he did, that no one could ever understand her like he did. The words didn't sound like love anymore. They sounded like a warning. The next day at school, she avoided him completely. He didn't text her, didn't wait for her by her locker. For a moment, she thought maybe he finally understood. Maybe he was letting her go. Then she found the note in her backpack. It wasn't a love note. It wasn't an apology. It was a list of names, the names of every guy she had talked to in the past month. Some of them were barely more than acquaintances. Next to each name was a word: liar, cheater, slut. Her heart pounded in her chest. She looked around the hallway, searching for him, but he wasn't there. That night, when she got home, he was waiting for her in the living room. Their parents weren't home yet. He stood up when she walked in, his eyes locked on hers. "Did you get my note?" he asked calmly, like they were talking about homework. She didn't answer. She didn't know what to say. "I just wanted you to know," he said, his voice low and steady. "I see everything. I know everything." Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, to ask him what the hell was wrong with him, but she was too scared of the answer. Something had snapped inside him, and she wasn't sure if it could ever be fixed. The house felt colder now, even when the heat was on. She avoided him as much as she could, but it was impossible to escape completely. He was always there, in the hallway, at the dinner table, lingering outside her room late at night. She could feel his eyes on her, even when she wasn't looking. It wasn't like before, when his gaze felt warm and safe. Now, it felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Their parents still had no idea. They smiled and laughed at dinner, talking about weekend plans and upcoming vacations. They didn't notice how quiet the two of them had become, or how she barely ate anymore. She forced a smile and nodded along, pretending everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore. One night, their parents decided to go out for dinner. Just the two of them. A date night. She begged her mom not to leave her alone with him, but she couldn't explain why without revealing everything. Her mom just laughed softly and told her to stop being dramatic. The door closed behind them, and the house went silent. She was in her room when she heard his footsteps coming down the hall. Slow, deliberate, they stopped right outside her door. Her heart was racing so hard it hurt. She stared at the door handle, praying he would just walk away. But the handle turned. He didn't knock. He didn't ask to come in. He just opened the door and stood there, watching her. "I miss you," he said softly, like nothing had happened. Like he wasn't the same person who had left that awful note in her backpack. She didn't answer. Her voice felt trapped somewhere in her throat. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him. The click of the lock echoed in the quiet room. "You're not scared of me, are you?" he asked, tilting his head. His voice was calm, but his eyes weren't. She swallowed hard. "Please, just go." He didn't move. His expression darkened, his jaw tightening. "You're mine," he said, his voice low and shaking. "You can't just walk away from me." "You think you can? After everything?" Her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. He wasn't the boy she once loved anymore. He was someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. He took a step closer. "You think they'll believe you?" he continued, his voice cold now. "If you tell them, they'll hate you. They'll blame you for ruining everything." Her eyes burned with tears, but she blinked them away. She couldn't cry now. She couldn't let him see her break. "I won't tell anyone," she whispered, her voice barely there. "Just please let me go." For a second, he looked like he might. His face softened, and for a fleeting moment, she saw a glimpse of the boy he used to be. But then it was gone, replaced by something hollow. "No," he said quietly. "If I can't have you, no one can." Her blood ran cold. He lunged before she could scream. His hands wrapped around her throat, and the world tilted sideways as he shoved her back onto the bed. She clawed at his arms, her lungs burning for air. She could see his face, twisted with rage and heartbreak all at once. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but his grip didn't loosen. Her vision blurred. The room spun. She thought about her mom. She thought about the life she was supposed to have. And then everything went black. When their parents came home, the house was quiet again. The lights were still on. It looked normal, too normal. But upstairs, everything had changed forever. The front door clicked open, and their parents walked in, laughing softly from whatever light-hearted conversation they'd been having. The sound felt completely out of place in a house that no longer held the same warmth it once did. They called out, expecting the usual, maybe the TV humming in the background, the kids in their rooms, everything peaceful and quiet. But the silence that greeted them was too heavy, too unnatural. It wasn't the silence of a calm home. It was the kind of silence that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. The mother noticed it first. A mother's instinct, they say. She felt in her chest before her brain could process why. Her voice wavered as she called her daughter's name again, this time louder. No answer. The father frowned, setting down his keys. He tried to brush it off. Maybe they were asleep. Maybe they had their headphones on. But the knot in his stomach tightened. He didn't know why. He just knew something wasn't right. They split up without saying a word, each heading to check the bedrooms. The father went to his son's room first. Empty. The bed was made untouched. The mother reached her daughter's door. It was closed. She knocked softly, her voice trembling now. Still nothing. Her hand shook as she twisted the doorknob. The door didn't budge. Locked. Her heart raced. Her daughter never locked her door. Not like this. She called for her husband, panic rising in her throat. He heard the fear in her voice and came running. One look at her face, and he didn't ask questions. He slammed his shoulder into the door. Once. Twice. The third time, it gave way with a sickening crack. What they saw on the other side didn't make sense at first. It couldn't be real. Their minds refused to accept it. The room was a wreck. Blankets twisted. The lamp knocked the floor. Shards of a picture frame scattered everywhere. And there on the bed was their daughter. Still, too still. Her face was pale, lips slightly parted, eyes half-lidded as though she'd fallen asleep with them open. The mother screamed. The sound was raw, jagged, and animalistic. It tore through the house, loud enough to make the neighbors' dogs bark. She stumbled forward, reaching for her daughter, but the father grabbed her, pulling her back. He didn't want her to see the bruises on their little girl's throat. He didn't want her to see the truth, but the truth was already there, staring back at them. The son was nowhere to be found. His room was empty. His phone was gone. His shoes were gone. He had vanished, leaving nothing but a hollow, broken house behind. The police arrived quickly, too late to do anything but ask questions the parents didn't know how to answer. No, they hadn't noticed anything strange between the kids. They got along so well. They seemed close, but not like that. No, they never imagined something like this could happen. How could they? Detectives scoured the room, the house, the neighborhood. They found his computer, his social media accounts, his journals. That's when they realized this wasn't just a sudden burst of violence. It had been building for months. He had written everything down, every twisted thought, every moment of jealousy, every time he felt her slipping away from him. The obsession, the possessiveness, the belief that they were meant to be together no matter what. It was all there in his words. He didn't see her as his stepsister anymore. He saw her as his. And when she tried to pull away, he couldn't handle it. The last page of his journal was the worst. If I can't have her, no one will. Days passed, then weeks. His face was plastered on every news channel, every headline. He wasn't a missing person anymore. He was a fugitive, a murderer. The whole country knew his name. Sightings popped up everywhere, gas stations, rest stops, bus stations. But every lead ended the same way. Nowhere. It was like he disappeared into thin air. Some people thought he was dead, that he took his own life after realizing what he had done. Others weren't so sure. The family couldn't stay in that house. The mother couldn't walk past her daughter's empty room without breaking down. The father blamed himself, though he never said it out loud. They packed up and moved away, trying to leave the nightmare behind. But how do you escape something like that? How do you move on from losing your child to someone you once trusted? The story didn't fade. True Crime Channel podcasts and YouTube documentaries kept the tragedy alive. People debated what really happened, dissecting every journal entry, every social media post. Some blamed the girl, said she led him on, played with his feelings. Others blamed him entirely, calling him a monster. But the truth was simpler than that. It wasn't love. It was never love. It was obsession. And obsession doesn't let go quietly. Even now, years later, some people still claim to see him. A boy with haunted eyes and a hollow expression, standing on the side of the road, hitchhiking toward nowhere. Maybe he's still out there. Maybe he's watching, waiting,